A vision becomes a milestone when it helps make our lives richer with love and laughter. When it helps make a cleaner, smarter, and a more beautiful planet. So that you can set off on joyous new journeys and adventures. Building stronger bonds and bridging impossible distances, which take you from the ever new to the forever beautiful. Opening up vistas and windows to a vibrant new world. A vision becomes a milestone when it touches millions of lives. Aditya Birla Group. Big in your life.
Wealthy in minerals, rapid industrialization, swift pace of development, creating its unique identity in the nation's development roadmap, is the success story of Chhattisgarh. Chhattisgarh is presently ranked 4th in the Ease of Doing Business Index in India. A lot of credit for this goes to the Chhattisgarh's visionary leadership to create a bright future for its citizens. With the potential to generate 24,000 megawatts, Chhattisgarh is all set to be the power pivot of the country. Chhattisgarh has been topping the charts as the cleanest state. Due to the all-round rural development and agriculture welfare schemes, Chhattisgarh is a model state for rural prosperity and urban excellence. With the intent of the state leadership and results being seen on ground, Chhattisgarh is on the path of rapid and model growth and development.
There are those who are always looking for what's next. Changing lanes, shifting modes, always in command. Sensing what lies ahead. That first scent of yet another success. The all-new Hyundai Tucson next drives now.
माननीय प्रधानमंत्री श्री नरेंद्र मोदी के विजन और प्रदेश के युवा मुख्यमंत्री पुष्कर सिंह धामी के मिशन से प्रगति के पथ पर निरंतर आगे बढ़ रहा है उत्तराखंड। रोजगार, शिक्षा, स्वास्थ्य, निवेश और भ्रष्टाचार मुक्त उत्तराखंड के सपने को साकार कर रही है उत्तराखंड सरकार। पर्यटन से राज्य में मिल रहे हैं आर्थिक प्रगति को पंख। उत्तराखंड के सीएम तक पहुंच रही जनता की आवाज। उत्तराखंड में बढ़ता निवेश बन रहा है विकास का मुख्य आधार। राज्य की जनता की सुनी मन की बात मिलने जा रहा है राज्य को मजबूत भू कानून का आधार। उत्तराखंड के वीर सैनिकों का हो रहा है सम्मान। प्रदेश में भ्रष्टाचार पर की बड़ी चोट। सुखी, समृद्ध, खुशहाली की तरफ लगातार है बढ़ना। जन जन का है सपना, आगे बढ़ता रहे उत्तराखंड अपना।
A land of awakening. A land of joy. and where every step forward is a journey within. I have started my journey. When will you start yours?
With over 8,000 passionate employees working hard in difficult terrain, pushing boundaries, transforming India's energy landscape. We stand ready with innovative prowess to write another history, fueling the nation and contributing to India's energy security. We are Oil India Limited.
From the interior parts of hilly areas to metro cities, today there are more than 8,800 Jan Aushadhi Kendras have been opened to provide affordable and quality medicines. These centers have 1,616 types of medicines and 250 types of surgical devices available at up to 90% off. By providing affordable medicines to about 10 lakh patients every day, Jan Aushadhi has been able to save up to 18,000 crore rupees for needy people in the last 8 years. Quality is also at the forefront of medicines at low prices.
2025 तक हम छलांग लगा चुके होंगे $1 ट्रिलियन डिजिटल इकोनॉमी की ओर।
आज जब हम आजादी का अमृत महोत्सव मना रहे हैं, तो मेरा भी यही सपना है कि भारत में हर हाथ में स्मार्टफोन हो, हर खेत में ड्रोन हो और हर घर में समृद्धि हो।
Digital India, catalyzing new India's decade. Jai Hind.
जय जय गंगे जय जय गंगे नमामि गंगे नहीं रुकेंगे हम स्वच्छ करेंगे तू युग युग से बहती आई तूने ही हमको पाला है तेरी उंगली पकड़ चलना सीखा जीवन तूने ही संभाला है तेरा कर्ज चुकाना है हमको कर्तव्य निभाना है हमको नमामि गंगे हम स्वच्छ करेंगे हम स्वच्छ करेंगे
Power Grid, a Maharatna PSU of Government of India, largest transmission utility of country,
embarked on one such remarkable journey to establish one nation, one grid, one frequency, high voltage integrated transmission network, an electric superhighway through which power flows across the length and breadth of the country. Meeting challenges has always been a way of life at Power Grid. Transmitting power, transforming lives.
REC unleashes the potential of energy. REC funds energy. Funding that catalyzes. Funding that inspires. Funding that transforms. For sustainability and reliability. For investment and development. Adding value every day in every way. This is what our energy is. This is REC.
Good evening and welcome to day 3 of the Hindustan Times Leadership Summit. We have 2 very interesting sessions lined up for you today. We have a session with Dr. Atusi Brooks, who's a leadership and happiness professor. And we have a session with India's External Affairs Minister, Dr. S. Jaishankar. But first, an announcement of a small change. We were originally scheduled to start with Dr. Brooks, but we will instead start and have our first session with Dr. Jaishankar, the External Affairs Minister. This is a very interesting time when you speak in terms of foreign affairs. Geopolitical alignments are changing. There is strife in many parts of the world. There are challenges which are economic at one level, but there are other challenges related to the climate crisis, for instance, at another level. And there are still other challenges related to great power rivalry at the third level. And foreign affairs has to negotiate the complex interplay of all three factors. To tell us how India is doing it, we have with us Dr. Jaishankar.
Our next guest is someone who can give us real insight into the workings of the Modi government. External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar has helped India navigate a string of crises since he took over office in 2019, including the standoff with China on the LAC and the wide-ranging impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic, and more recently, the Ukraine conflict. As a former foreign secretary and envoy to US and China, Mr. Jaishankar has seen the sphere from all angles and has also authored a book on Indian diplomacy. So, what's India's outlook to the growing might of China in the neighborhood? It's over to HT editor R. Sukumar, who will be in conversation with him.
Good evening and welcome to a special telecast of the Hindustan Times Leadership Summit. I have with me then External Affairs Minister, Dr. Jaishankar. This is a very interesting time, but as the Minister was telling me, all times are interesting and every year is interesting in its own way. I want to start, Minister, with a slightly macro question. Around 5 years back, there was a sense that there was a stable global order, both geopolitically and economically. Globalization seemed to be the model that would work. And things seemed settled. But over the last 5 years, I mean, over the last decade really, but increasingly so over the last 5 years, we've had many shocks to the system. COVID, of course, is one shock to the system. What's happening with the climate crisis is another shock to the system. Geopolitical conflicts have always been there, but they are now causing untold havoc when it comes to supply chains and the economic impacts that they play out. And things suddenly look a lot more unsettled. How do you see the future going forward, the medium-term to long-term future going forward? Are we in for a period of churn, or will things settle down again, or will we find a new equilibrium?
Well, first of all, let me say it's a great pleasure to join you today. And through you, I send my good wishes to all the people who are watching the summit and reading your newspaper. I think it's a good note to start the conversation, because I would actually say probably from about 2008, and I use 2008, the global financial crisis, as the inflection point, you can say. I use that to actually underline that the globalization model has been more and more challenged. You had political manifestations of that. I think Brexit was one manifestation. Election of Donald Trump was a manifestation. What you had economic manifestations which people were in denial about. I think there was a kind of a globalization mantra which a lot of people, including in our country, bought into without too much application of mind and too much thinking of our own interests out there. And in a sense, the COVID brought out into the open a lot of the problems which till then had been kept firmly under the carpet. So we actually saw that supply chains were very fragile, that production was actually overly concentrated, that people were dependent on limited geographies. And by the way, a lot of this was being politically leveraged as well. So it wasn't just, I'm not talking purely from a economic efficiency viewpoint. I'm even reminding you how in the last 10 to 20 years, actually the globalization was being politically utilized to actually for national advantage and to shape global politics. So you had all of this one after another building up. I think the Ukraine conflict has added to the stress factors. My sense is there are some long-standing issues. Fragility can be enhanced by terrorist actions. This year, you've seen how actually climate change is affecting the global economy. You've had a very, very hot summer in Europe. You've had in many parts of the world, including us, extreme heat, extreme rain, in some parts of the world, extreme cold. Overall, I would say, let's talk short to medium term. I would be looking at a very unsettled world, at a lot of turbulence and volatility. I think this is a time when we frankly need leadership, we need experience, we need the ability to guide this nation in rough seas. And believe me, the rough seas, you can already feel the waves in a way.
Well, what does it mean for policy? What does it mean for foreign policy specifically? And you mentioned leadership. What does it mean for the country's approach to various factors? Because at the end of the day, we have a population of 1.3 billion, and there are challenges.
Mm-hmm.
There are huge challenges. Food is a challenge. I mean, we are an extremely food secure nation, but something like the climate crisis could actually jeopardize that too. Economic factors that are happening around the world do have a cascading effect on what is happening in our country. So how do you create your own policy? How do you draft your policy? What are the inputs that go into it?
In a sense, a common worry among all the major economies and polities of the world is because, what I told you is not rocket science. I mean, I think this is a very widely shared assessment among people in my business, that we are going to go through difficult times. We should not think of it as incidents. We should think of it as layer after layer, complication after complication. This is a general assumption on which everybody is working. Now, how do we respond to it? I think in a way, a lot of countries today, they call it, giving it different names, but they are trying to de-risk their daily existence in a way. They are, in many cases, trying to become more self-sufficient or self-reliant. They are limiting their international exposure in areas where they don't need to. They are looking for redundancy. If you were reliant on a few trade partners, you look for more. If you are buying from a few sources, look for more. So there is a big sort of an economic churn, which is today centered around more resilient, reliable security supply chains. There is also, I would argue, a digital churn, where today, where your data is, who harvests your data, who processes your data, these things matter. Some time ago, frankly, even though there were voices of concern in this country, people were not bothered who runs our, what is in our telecommunications network, how do our smart grids work. I think today these are all increasing sources of concern, in my view, legitimate concern. So there is today hedging, de-risking, redundancy, a kind of a self-reliance going on. So to my mind, when people, today look at the government's goal of an Atmanirbhar Bharat, we should not think of it, in that old sort of primitive globalization, non-globalization, we are going back to protectionism. I think this is a new era. We need, as a big polity, with very large vulnerable sections in this country, to actually see how do we safeguard ourselves in a difficult era. How do we build those capabilities in a difficult era? So it is a mindset change, it's a capability change, it is a strategic change.
And it's a model change.
Yes, it is a model
because,
change.
Because, one of the key tenets of globalization was that you would make where it was the cheapest to make a product, or you would source from the place where it was cheapest to source from. Except that because supply chains are no longer dependable, and we've just been shown because of COVID and then because of geopolitical factors how fragile they are, there is all the more reason to at least strategically important products to ensure that you have capability to make them within your own borders.
Well, that's one way of looking at it. I do not disagree with you, but I have a much more fundamental reservation. This logic which you said, where is it cheapest to make from? Essentially what was happening was, we defined reform, saying it's cheaper to make in some other country, for example, China. So therefore, you felt, let us progress by importing stuff from China. Now, what was happening was we were not reforming our own economy because somebody else had reformed faster and stronger than us. So, our concept of reform was very limited. We were not doing, we are not building the deep strengths and the supply chains. You had GDP growth, we didn't have employment growth commensurate to that. So I actually, frankly, think that there's a fundamental issue about the model, not just a security question mark or a strategic question mark. I would say an economic question mark, a social question mark, a political question mark. That in this country, do we really think we will build a future based on other people producing cheaper than us? Where is our competitive sense? Where is that desire to take this nation forward? I think that was what was lacking till 2014. That there was no vision about where this nation was going. What is it which we need to continuously do to actually improve our performance? What is it we need to deliver to our people? How can you justify reform if reform does not mean employment and, domestic benefits to the more vulnerable sections? And today, if you see, I would say, for me, progress would be digital delivery of benefits, financial inclusion, the, idea of actually manufacturing in India. For a country like us, I've heard people who say, we should not even be in manufacturing. I don't know what their vision of India is. Believe me, it's not the vision I have, and I don't think the majority of people in this country have either.
That's very well put. You mentioned digitization, so I want to just ask you one more question on this topic, and then of course I want to get into more specifics. Because of the information economy, you now have these very large non-state actors, big tech. And you mentioned data sovereignty and things like that. And these are basically firms that are, and platforms that are huge enough to actually control, manipulate information, shape opinions. And you could say that, there's a school of thought that says this is no different from the oil companies of, the first generation oil companies and what they did around the world. but it's actually far deeper. And in some ways...
They manipulate your mind more than oil companies did.
Sometimes it's far more insidious.
Yes, absolutely.
And so how do you deal with that?
I don't think there are easy answers. But I think, first of all, there should be awareness. There should be awareness today that you have private players whose size is bigger. I mean, if you actually take the market cap of some of these companies and look at it in terms of GDP of countries, they will be fairly high up there. So you have companies who are bigger than many countries. Now, it's not just a matter of size. We are now increasingly seeing they have interests, they have agendas, they have views. Now, some of them may be, typically we tend to pick on, the tech companies because they are very visible. But I think it's a bigger problem than that, which is you have around the world people with economic interests, with ideological viewpoints, who believe today that it is their power, their right to certify, decertify, criticize, support, legitimize, delegitimize. This is an issue. We speak today about democracy, but I point out to you, when democracy gives results which sometimes does not suit an elite in some part of the world, immediately you start attaching adjectives and caveats. No, this is completely ideological. It's like saying, I didn't like the way this match produced a result, so I'll now question the match. Or I will say there's something wrong with the pitch. So, and please understand, this is politics. Okay? Do not take this as a debate. Please do not take this at all as an objective evaluation. This is pure politics, which is sometimes today's politics. The one thing globalization has done, it has globalized politics. People, when you cannot win inside a country, you export the debate outside. When you cannot get enough voices inside the country, you will call up backup from outside. So, these are all challenges in today's politics.
We will now descend to matters which are a little more mundane. India released its G20 logo earlier this week with a focus on one Earth, one family, one future. Ambitious and bold goal, like all goals should be. But like you pointed out just now, we are going through several simultaneous crises, from climate change to polarization between the great powers, extreme nationalism in some corners. How do you intend to navigate this reality? Because as G20 chair, it's one of the things that we have to do to achieve our goals.
Well, let me make 3 points here. One, the G20 was envisaged as a financial forum, you can say economic forum. Okay, it came, the immediate backdrop to it was the global financial crisis. I think, first of all, it's important that the G20 remain true to the G20. That it has a mandate, it has an agenda, there is a tradition. It should focus on what it was meant to do. The second point I would make is there are broad global concerns out there, which most people intuitively agree on the concerns. They may quibble, haggle over the solutions. But today, for example, after the COVID, how can anybody say health is not a priority? When you see its power, how can you say digital should not be central? Or we're all agreed. I think the climate deniers are today less and less with each passing day. So, green growth, sustainable growth. There are even agendas which are laid out. There's an Agenda 2030 on sustainable development. There are commitments which countries made in Paris and in Glasgow, and by the way, before as well. You can go back to Kyoto. So some of it is known, okay? But I think what is, from India's perspective, first of all, remember the G20 summit under Indonesia's presidency is still to take place. So we have to wait for that to happen and really take stock after that. Obviously, we have our ideas, we have our debates. You know, the Prime Minister has been holding consultations inside the government, outside the government. But finally, my sense is a country like India, about whom there are so much expectations from the global south. We need to reflect not just our viewpoint. We also, I think there's a broader constituency that we represent. I think that constituency has hopes on us. So my sense is that when we sharply articulate what are the presidency priorities, I think we will do so with a sense of larger responsibility. It's probably a bit early right now to say exactly what it would be, but you can see, you know, the world's problems are pretty obvious today. I think you look at energy security, you look at food security, you look at worries about fertilizers, you know, climate, all these are there.
At a time of increasing stress areas between the great powers, a body like the G20 obviously has, there are lots of issues, right? I mean, it's not easy to smooth them over. And Indonesia's experience over the last year has shown just how difficult it is. Do you see things settling down?
I think the Bali summit will tell us something. At the moment, it's fairly obvious that emotions are high. I would say strong views, polarization, I think would certainly be one description for what is happening. But do remember one thing. In terms of the politics or the strategy or the, you know, the actual sense, I'm now talking about the Ukraine conflict. In a sense, it is perceived as a East-West polarization. But if you look at the implications of it, to some degree now it has become a North-South polarization, because the South is feeling the brunt of the impact without actually being able to influence any of the decision making in the process. That is one set of issues. There are other set of issues, as I said, issues in our part of the world. These are, some of them are economic issues, some are issues about, you know, what kind of world do we live in? Do we, you know, respect for international law, for the rules, for norms, for countries dealing with each other, you know, respecting each other's sovereignty. These are sometimes very fundamental issues. Now, some of these will obviously influence G20, but remember, G20 is not the forum to settle these issues, or frankly, even to primarily debate this issue. There are other forums to do that. I mean, G20 has a mandate. That mandate is very much, you know, an economic, financial mandate. But, you know, this is the real world. So I guess some things, you know, we will see a spillover.
You've continuously spoken, not just now, but even previously, about the implications of the war on the global south.
Mm-hmm.
India is one of the few countries that speaks to all sides concerned.
Mm-hmm.
Given this, there's been increasing speculation, especially in recent days, about an Indian role in sort of brokering peace between these two countries. Two questions. One, is the conflict ready for resolution? Because, you know, there's a time when, you know, it looks like both sides are ready to come to talks, and you probably have a great sense of whether it is that time now. And two, is India willing to be a facilitator and offer us good officers to sort of broker a peace between these two countries?
You asked whether the situation is ripe or is it premature. I think your question itself is premature. And in a way, we're not looking. We cannot approach today's problems with sort of models or experiences drawn. This is a very, very different situation in which we are in today. My own sense is that those countries who really believe that that this is, as the Prime Minister said, not an era of war, who do not believe that such issues can be settled on the battlefield, who believe that there is an urgent necessity for countries to get back to the negotiating table, who can see the suffering which others are facing, the difficulties which others are facing, who have nothing to do with this issue, but they are collateral, in a sense, collateral damage to what is happening. So I think countries like this is very important that, in a sense, I would look at it like a body of opinion, who articulate their concerns and try to shape the thinking of those more directly involved in a positive direction. I think beyond that, to suggest anything else, I don't think is justified at this point of time.
One of the things the conflict has done is really told us a little bit about the balance of power around the world, right? I mean, it's not as if the West has managed to have its way. It's not. And it shows the limitations of multilateral fora also to achieve the desired objectives. Where do you see great power balance going? I mean, is it going to be a multipolar world, as you've said? Is there likely to be a concentration more along bipolar lines? How is it going to be going forward?
I'm not sure I'd put it the way you have. I would put it this way, that the one bit I would sort of seize on from your remarks is the multipolar reference. But I think even multipolar suggests a degree of stability, that instead of one or two, many have arrived. I think the global situation is far, far more fluid. And in the near term, perhaps more than the near term, the real challenge is it's going to be very difficult to find balances. That different parties will push and pull to try to improve their positioning or standing or influence. So you are going to have really, again, I would say perhaps for this decade, a far more fluid international situation where there will be ebbs and flows and combinations and issues and frictions and possibly worse, which is what we have seen. So I'm actually, I began by painting to you for reasons of, COVID and economic stresses and globalization inequities and conflicts, a certain picture which quite honestly was not optimistic. But I would say, even from a narrower perspective, is there a settling down among major players? I do not see a settling down among major players in the near term. In fact, I think there are a whole lot of new dynamics, some of which have been triggered by
and it's churn, right? It's not just jockeying; it's proper churn.
Yeah, it's a proper churn. It's a churn. I do not know if you want a more stronger term than a churn. No, which goes in different directions. So I would just think back, where were we a year ago and where are we now? So I think that, I would really like to share that sense of how uncertain, unpredictable, volatile, turbulent this world is going to be. And therefore, why it is important in India that we get our act together. And a large part of getting our act together is doing the right things at home, building up the strengths at home, doing the governance, the delivery, the creation of capabilities and assets. At this time, it's I think particularly vital that we find our feet and we stay strong, because there is this sort of sense of a long period of global uncertainty before us.
Coming to China, you've maintained that the situation with China is not normal and that it can't all be peace and tranquility till actual peace is arrived at the border.
No. I think it's important to get me right.
Yeah.
I am saying that unless there is peace and tranquility in the border areas, unless there is observance of agreements and no unilateral attempt made to change status quo, the relationship cannot be normal and is not normal.
China seems to have reframed the issue in its own public narrative, right? I mean, one connected to sovereignty and territorial integrity, and also tried to earn domestic capital from it. Do you think the situation has become more intractable now? Do you think that progress can be made?
I would say, clearly what happened in 2020 was an attempt by one party, and we know which one, to depart from agreements and understandings. And that is at the heart of the issue. Now, have we made progress from then? In some respects, yes. Relatively speaking, there were multiple friction points. I think, and in those friction points, there was dangerously close-up deployments by the military. I think some of those issues have been worked out in keeping in mind equal and mutual security. But there are some which still need to be worked upon. So I think it's in the nature of what I do that you have to keep, it's important to persevere and to keep pushing. You don't, because it is tough or it is complicated, you don't say, well, that's not going to happen. So I keep on at it, and I do genuinely believe that there will be a realization, there should be a realization that the present state of relations is not even in China's own interest.
Well, what can we do to make sure that this realization is there?
No, I think we are doing a lot of things in terms of various policies and various pronouncements and the state of relations. So, after all, ask yourself, if you are an objective observer looking at the state of India-China relations, could you suggest actually that everything is okay and this can carry on without any negative impact for the parties concerned? I don't think so. Yeah. So I think it's pretty obvious. I don't think there's any ambiguity about our signaling and our messaging. Naturally, it's for, they will wait from their interests and where they are. But I put it this way, that, it isn't just a matter of public sentiment. And public sentiment is strong, let me tell you that. I think it's government policy, it is national thinking, it is public sentiment, and it is strategic calculation. I do not think that the current state can continue without damage to the relationship.
One of the key themes in Xi Jinping's nationalist narrative is Taiwan. Do you see a risk of escalation of tensions across the Taiwan Strait?
I don't do predictions. I do calculations. And sometimes when I do calculations, I keep it to myself.
I think you've answered that question. Moving on to Quad, got more institutionalized in recent years. The mechanism seems to have evolved. What do you think has worked, and what do you think are the areas where you think more can be done?
I would not get over over-focused on this whole institutionalization of Quad. To my mind, it is all, that's exactly what we are not trying to do. Meaning, the idea of Quad is a sort of an easy, comfortable consultation process and ability to work together, responding to the needs of the day, the issues of the day. So, what has happened is a lot of international relations in the last 75 years is about this whole, we must have a treaty, there must be an obligation, there must be a secretariat, there must be institutions. This is like, guys, that's not what it is about. So, I would say judge it by its effectiveness, by its relevance, by the impact it is making. And I would say from 2017, 5 years ago, when this incarnation of Quad came into being, at that time at a sort of secretary level, I attended the first meeting as foreign secretary then. I think from that today to reach the summit level and do the things which we are doing, looking at the coordination and the global good that the Quad is contributing, I think has been very commendable.
Both US national security and its national defense strategy mention India as a key partner. The relationship has grown, it seems to have become warmer. What do we see as the role for US in our own national security and strategy metrics?
The United States is today one of our principal partners, any way you look at it. Politically, militarily, economically, people-to-people contact. So I cannot overstate the importance of this relationship. My sense of what has changed in the last few years is that the two countries are looking at the relationship and then examining and strategizing how it applies to a world in transformation. So it is how they are actually using the relationship for a larger purpose. I think that is really what has changed. I mean, obviously they will look at it from their worldview and their perspective. We will do so from our own. But I would say this, that today, as someone, I started working on the American account more than 40 years ago. I mean, sea change would be a gross understatement. I mean, today, I think the level of contact, the level of comfort, the openness, the ability to work together, I think this have really been quite remarkable. It's been quite a remarkable journey.
Do you think, you just mentioned this change with respect to the US. With the US in particular and with the West in general, our approach as a country, as a culture, has traditionally been one of distrust. Is that changing?
There are actually historical reasons for that. And we both know it. But it's important as we get bigger and go up in the world, we also strategize. Even on likes and dislikes and trust and distrust, you must strategize. Okay? I put it to you that a lot of the big changes in the world, especially in Asia, if you look at the rise of Japan, at the rise of China, of Korea, of ASEAN, even some of the European countries which staged a comeback after the Second World War, they did so in partnership with the West. Okay, so choices are never absolute. Okay, choices are historical, comparative. Choices are sometimes also calculative. I would say, to my mind, if I take the West as an entity, there are obviously some areas where we would not think similarly. There would be many areas where we would. The fact that we are a democratic society, with a pluralistic ethos, the fact that we are a market economy, I think these are all characteristics which bring us closer to the West. But I would, at the end of the day, make an interest calculation that I believe today that India's interests are served well by working closely with Western countries. I think that sense today, even that calculation today is reciprocated by the West. When I look, not just you mentioned the American relationship, but I look at our relationship with the EU, I look at the relationship with UK, so with Australia, if you can count Japan as part of the West. I think there is also a transformation with the collective West, and I believe that's very much in our interest as well.
Last question. I'm sitting here with India's foreign minister, and we've been conversing for almost 35-40 minutes, and we've not discussed Pakistan at all. At one point in time, I think the conversation would have solely been about Pakistan. So as a last question.
Times have changed, haven't they?
Yeah, they have changed.
Yeah.
Where do things stand?
For the better, I hope you agree.
For the better.
Yeah.
Where do things stand?
With Pakistan?
With Pakistan.
Well, I think it's, our understanding within the government is not different from the expectations of the public. My sense is the people of the country want a neighborly relationship with Pakistan, but they want a good neighborly relationship, and good neighbors don't do terrorism. I think it's as simple as that.
Dr. Jaishankar, thank you very much.
Pleasure.
A vision becomes a milestone when it helps make our lives richer with love and laughter. When it helps make a cleaner, smarter, and a more beautiful planet. So that you can set off on joyous new journeys and adventures. Building stronger bonds and bridging impossible distances, which take you from the ever new to the forever beautiful. Opening up vistas and windows to a vibrant new world. A vision becomes a milestone when it touches millions of lives. Aditya Birla Group, big in your life.
We have Arthur C. Brooks in conversation with HT editor R. Sukumar. At a time when there's so much conversation across the world about work-life balance, about the meaning of life, the Harvard professor can give us insight on true happiness, how to achieve it, and to stay there. Brooks is the author of 12 books, including the 2022 #1 New York Times bestseller, From Strength to Strength, Finding Success, Happiness, and Deep Purpose in the Second Half of Life. So in pursuit of happiness, it's over to Sukumar.
Good evening and welcome to a special session of the Hindustan Times Leadership Summit. Special for so many reasons. Special to me personally because our speaker today is someone whose works I've read, whose podcasts I've listened to, and I'm not normally into books that are vaguely classified as self-help books. And while Dr. Brooks' books are not close to that, I have a feeling that that's where they'll end up in many Indian bookstores. And when I read his work, it floored me because I think he spoke about challenges and issues that many of us confront, especially many people who manage to achieve some level of success in their lives and then sort of plateau as they enter the second part of their lives. But we will talk about that in a bit. I want to start by getting Dr. Brooks to tell us his life story, to tell us a little bit about himself, because I think it's very, it in many ways illustrates some of the concepts that he talks about in his books. So Dr. Brooks, welcome. Thank you for being with us. And could you tell us your story?
Thank you very much. What a delight it is to be with all of you and my friends in India. I have not been in India in person since the coronavirus epidemic. Ordinarily, I try to come every year. It's literally my favorite place to visit in the world. And there are a lot of reasons for that. I love the culture. I love the sense of humor, which is very similar to the American sense of humor, I find. I like the easy spirituality and the ease with which people live their lives around a strong sense of the divine. I feel very much at home when I'm there. So it's wonderful to be back with you virtually. And I think I'll be probably visiting your beautiful country again in person in April. And I just can't wait. I have to say, it's something that I look forward to every year. My own personal journey is an unusual one. And most of the people watching here this evening, they have unusual stories as well. You know, one of the wonderful things about the modern world is that we can invent our lives, that we live our lives like startup endeavors, and that therefore the adventure can kind of surprise you from time to time, and it certainly has been the case. I grew up on the west coast of the United States in a city called Seattle, in the northwest corner on the Pacific. I grew up with really one intention, which was to be a classical musician. My father was a mathematics professor. My mother was an artist, and I showed a lot of aptitude for classical music on violin and then piano, and then later on the French horn when I was 8 or 9 years old. And that's really all I wanted to do for my life. And so by 19 years old, I had left college. I had left the university because it seemed like a waste of time to be spending time in the university. And I went out working on the road. And my first major tour of concerts when I was 19 years old took me to India. And the first place I started off in India was in Madras, was in Chennai. And I had the most amazing, life-changing experience because everything broke down. There was some terrible storms, and I was marooned in Madras. Nobody knew where I was. I was by myself, wandering the city for 4 days. And it was one of the most life-changing experiences because I met ordinary people. I didn't have people that were trying to curate my experience. I learned a little bit about, how people interact with strangers. And I have to say, I fell in love with India because I got lost in India when I was 19 years old. And I've made a point to go back ever since. My career as a musician continued all the way through my 20s. In my late 20s, I left music and went back to school. I got my undergraduate degree, and then I went and I got my PhD. I became an economist, a social scientist, and then I taught at the university for 10 years. At that point, I left and I became a CEO, the CEO of a large research organization, a think tank in Washington, D.C., called the American Enterprise Institute, dedicated to the principles that all people, especially those at the margins of society, should have equal opportunity. So it was a radically equal human dignity type of experience. And finally, I left that 3 years ago. I retired from that when I was 55 years old, and now I'm a professor at Harvard University. And I've dedicated the rest of my life, however long that is. I hope it's till I'm 100, until the end of my sannyasa. I hope that I can be dedicating myself to lifting people up and bringing them together in bonds of happiness and love, using science and ideas and exposure to the divine. That's my life's mission.
Thank you. The reason why Dr. Brooks is here is because his writings talk about subjects such as purpose and finding purpose. His writings and his podcasts and his articles and books and his various public appearances. They also talk about happiness. And as you can make out from his story, he's reinvented himself twice, from a career as a musician into a career as an academic and a CEO, and then a sort of post-retirement, although retirement seems to be entirely the wrong word to use here. Reinvention into someone who, as he says, is trying to help people. And his book, From Strength to Strength, starts off by dealing with the premise of decline and the inevitability of decline, including the physiological aspects. And he speaks of how, when we are young, we feel we are masters of the universe. Some people go out and achieve great success in their domains. But then as they start aging, they probably are not able to achieve the same level of success, or maybe they feel the need for a higher level of success to get the same amount of satisfaction that they used to get from even ordinary success previously. So I want to start off by asking Dr. Brooks about the inevitability of decline. Is this something that no one can escape from? Is it a given that all carriers will at some stage start seeing some kind of decline?
It is true, but we misunderstand what decline really means. The truth is that we all have in our abilities two very strong periods in our life of success, but they're quite different. Now, the way to understand that using Indian thinking is that there's an ancient theory in Indian wisdom, in Hindu thinking, called the ashramas, which everybody watching here on this evening is familiar with, but most Americans are not. The ashramas are the quarters of the perfect life. That starts with brahmacharya, which is the student phase. It goes to grihastha, the householder part of life, then to vanaprastha, which is sort of stepping back and becoming more familiar with the spiritual parts of life. And finally, sannyasa, which is in that which you would aspire to live in complete enlightenment in the last part of your life. Now, that corresponds to two intelligences that we've been able to ascertain in the world of neuroscience and social science. The first kind of intelligence is called fluid intelligence, which occurs in your 20s and 30s and your 40s, but then starts to decline. That's your ability to innovate, to focus very intently, to come up with new ideas, to solve problems. It's your early life genius. It's what makes you really good at what you do. If you're a young lawyer, if you're a young physician or accountant or electrician or whatever you do, the more you work, the better you get because of your fluid intelligence. That declines in your 40s and 50s very, very quickly. And most people think that that's the end of the good times. That's not. That's the beginning of the good times, because there's a second kind of intelligence behind it called crystallized intelligence. Now, again, this is not just the theory. This has been shown and proven by neuroscientists that the structure of the brain changes. You move from this innovative capacity to your capacity to use your wisdom as a teacher. You become a better instructor. You start to see patterns. You're able to manage other people. In other words, you go from being the person who solves the problems to the person who knows what the right problems are to solve and knows how to get the resources to get the solution. This is the reason that the best entrepreneurs, sole entrepreneurs, tend to be young, but the best venture capitalists tend to be old. Venture capitalism is based on crystallized intelligence, pattern recognition, wisdom, judgment, building teams. The problem that people have is they try to stay on their fluid intelligence curve. They try to stay in grihastha when they should be in vanaprastha, which is the recipe for pure frustration. You have to be on the right curve, the right ashrama, the right period in your life. And that means usually around 45 or 50 years old, moving into the new phase of life, using the new intelligence, moving into the next ashrama. And if you can do that, to go from innovator to instructor, whatever that means in your life, you will be more happy and more fulfilled, and you'll do more good for the world.
I have to ask you this. Given all the rapid advances in medical science, is it possible to extend this period of fluid intelligence? Is it possible for people to stay on the first curve longer?
Probably not. And one of the reasons is because this has nothing to do with inherent cognitive ability, but rather the structure of how the brain and mind work. What it allows us to do, because of medical science and the increases in longevity, which are miraculous and wonderful, is that once we're on the crystallized intelligence curve, we can stay on that for many more years, even decades. The key thing is by your 50s and 60s, you should be on your crystallized intelligence curve. And if you have good health and you're blessed, in your 70s and 80s and even your 90s, you can still be working with your crystallized intelligence, but you must move. You must know that you go from a sole proprietor to a team leader. You go from the star player to the great coach, no matter what that's the case. And you can continue to be on that second curve for many, many, many years if you're given the years.
But the problem for most people, even people who probably have read your books, sort of buy into what you're saying at a broad level, is that many people don't know how to let go, when to let go. Um, how do you make the transformation?
So one of the things is to listen to what your heart tells you about your work. Most people who are watching us, the reason they're watching the summit is because they want to be better at what they do. You know, there's nobody who's watching us who doesn't care about their career. There's nobody who says, I don't care about my work. I'm not ambitious at all. You're watching this leadership summit because you want to be a better leader. So I'm going to make an assumption about everybody watching us this evening that they are ambitious people. They want to be better at what they do. Now, if that's the case, then you need to listen to your own abilities. And this is how you know when it's time to start making a change in your life. What you find typically is that really important strivers, and striving is a word that we use in the United States a lot, but it means, you know, somebody who's trying to get ahead, somebody who wants to work hard, somebody who wants to do well because of the inherent satisfaction that comes from excellence itself. Strivers tend to find that after about age 40, they start to feel a little bit burnt out. So I have a dentist, a really good dentist, the best dentist in town. And my dentist started taking Fridays off around age 43. And I asked my dentist, why are you doing that? I thought you loved being a dentist. And my dentist said, I do love being a dentist, but I don't feel like I'm making progress anymore. Humans are wired for progress. And when they find that they're not getting more excellent, when things are not getting easier, when they're not innovating more, that's the reason they start to burn out. Doing, you simply have to start moving forward, exploring new avenues, thinking about new ways to express what you're doing. Think of yourself as more of a teacher, more of a coach, more of a team leader, more as a mentor, and you'll find the way to do it. You don't have to change careers necessarily. I did. I went from being a CEO to going back. I teach at Harvard University. I teach the best students, many of the best students in the world, many from India, about the science of happiness. I also write books, and I have an audience of about 500,000 people that I write for a week, and I'm doing a television show about happiness because I want to be a teacher for the rest of my life. But that's the point. You don't have to stop working or be less ambitious. You simply have to migrate your ambitions to the part of your life where you can serve others most effectively.
And by doing this, you're one of the premises in your book is that by doing this, people can stay relevant for longer. And as we know, everyone wants to be relevant, right? I mean, one of the things that all of us are worried about is that at some point in time, we will become irrelevant. And people tend to be very, very insecure about their relevance.
Absolutely. We can be relevant for longer, but most importantly, we can be happy. And we are happy when we're making progress. We're happy when we're creating value. We're happy when we're living up to our greatest potential. But if we're on the wrong curve, it's going to be too hard. If we're on the wrong curve, after a while, it's going to be impossible. All of the successful people who are unhappy later in life, it's because they're trying to stay on their fluid intelligence curve as opposed to getting on their crystallized intelligence curve, with no exceptions. This is what we see again and again. When you see an older person, a man who's 60 years old, and you know he's still trying to compete with younger people, and he's reminiscing about the good old days, and he's angry because people don't appreciate him anymore, he's on the wrong curve. Guaranteed he's on the wrong curve. And if I can work with him, and this is what I do now, I go into companies and I work with executives. I work with people who are trying to build teams of managers. And I say, this is how we should be thinking about our workforces. This is how we should be thinking of our own lives. Happier people are better workers. Happier people are better for society. This is how we should be molding our own companies and our own lives to live up to our best purpose.
If you were to broadly describe or distinguish between the skills that one needs to succeed in the first curve and the skills that one needs to succeed in the second curve, what would they be?
The first curve is really about innovation. It's about personal entrepreneurship, private work, solving problems, being faster and better, and having more skills than others. It's the first curve is the me curve. That's the curve where you invest in yourself. The second curve is the we curve. That's where I'm getting better at making you better. If you're working with me, I want to make you as good as you can be because that looks better for me. It makes us both better. The second curve is the one where I'm investing in other people. I'm becoming a better teacher. I'm lifting other people up. I'm becoming more generous in the way that I'm sharing the credit with other people. Because, and by the way, that is the curve where people are most happy because that's when they're serving the most. This is one of the reasons, by the way, you could say that your first curve is your parent curve. Your second curve is your grandparent curve. And everybody I know, I'm going to be a grandfather in 4 months. And everybody says it's much better than being a parent. It's much better than being a father. They say that grandchildren are God's reward for not killing your children. That's a Catholic joke. So, but one of the things that we know is that on your parenting curve, you're trying to do everything yourself and you're trying to solve all the problems by yourself. And when you're a grandparent, you're working with other people to actually help raise a child. That's a very beautiful thing. Now, that's a metaphor, obviously, for what we're doing in our work lives. This is the key thing. Remember, you're investing in yourself to be the best person that you can be in the beginning. Later, you take away a lot of your conceit. You take away a lot of your pride and arrogance, and you start working on developing other people when you're on your crystallized intelligence curve. If you can do that, you will be the happiest version of yourself.
One of the things that sort of makes this difficult is that in the first curve, a lot of us get feedback from the system, right? I mean, when the community, when society at large, when our peers recognize the success that we have, I think that sort of makes everyone feel good. And the fear that people have is that the second curve doesn't really come with the same kind of recognition, the same kind of reinforcing positive feedback loop, right? If one were to speak in terms of systems, from the community at large.
Yeah, we tend to worship the sole entrepreneur, the cowboy, the person who's really great at what they do. Our societies do that. We also tend to worship young people, and young people have a lot of fluid intelligence. But that leads to a huge number of problems individually and as a society. When I look at what's happening in Silicon Valley right now, most of the tech firms are really suffering right now. Now, why are they suffering? There's a lot of economic reasons. I'm an economist. I go on TV and I talk about the markets and this. The real reason is that these are industries that are being run by children. That's a problem. These are industries that are too dominated by fluid intelligence. Now, they're great geniuses. I understand that. They're at the top of their fluid intelligence curve. They need more crystallized intelligence. They're making mistakes that older people would never make. Facebook needs executives who are 70 years old. They don't need to be running a company with 30-year-olds. They need people in high positions. There's every international company in the world should have people who are 70 years old on the executive team, on the marketing team, on the product team, and on the human resources team, because they have crystallized intelligence. They can save these companies from themselves by not making all the mistakes over and over again. Fluid intelligence can solve a lot of problems, can innovate and invent amazing things, but they don't know how to solve basic human problems because they haven't seen enough problems. They haven't seen enough patterns over the course of their lives. That's the reason that older people have a unique thing that they need to bring. And this is how we have to understand ourselves. Now, I understand if you look at Instagram or television, it says that young people, beautiful people, hardworking people, energetic people, they don't have old bald men like you and me who are the examples of what everybody wants to be, but they should, because people who are 50 and 60 and 70, these are the people who can actually save companies from becoming bankrupt. They can save countries from melting down and going to war, because crystallized intelligence can do that. We need to celebrate that a lot more than we do, and we'd have a lot fewer problems today in politics, communities, families, and companies.
I can only say hear, hear. Let's move on to another issue that you have often raised in your writings, which is the role of spirituality in all this. What role does spirituality play in all this?
There are 4 practices of the happiest people. And this is something based on many books and articles, 10,000 academic research articles that look at the habits of the happiest people. Think of this as kind of the retirement investment plan for happiness. You need to make an investment in 4 things every day. I mean, there are thousands of habits that you can find for the happiest people. But if you boil the ocean of all of the research and data, it comes down to just 4 big things. One is work that's meaningful and serves others. Another is friendship. Critically, friendship outside of families, which is very important. For the people who are watching this summit, a lot of them have a lot of people that they know, but they're not real friends. They're deal friends. And everybody knows the difference between them. You need real friends to prosper and be happy. Number 3 is family life. Family life is critically important, and it's in crisis in India and in the United States. Family life is being decimated because of urbanization and work patterns, but just because of culture. So those are the first big 3: work that serves, friends, and family. But the last one is just as important, and that's faith. Faith or spirituality. Now, by that, I don't mean necessarily my faith. I'm a practicing Roman Catholic. It is literally the most important thing in my life. How do I practice my faith? I practice my faith every day. I go to Mass every day. I meditate. But where have I learned my meditation practice as a Catholic? I learned it in India. I sat with monks. I actually have learned meditation technique from Buddhists and Hindu masters. I have a teacher in southern India named Sri Nochur Venkataraman in Palakkad, who's been so helpful to me along this way. My point is there's lots of ways to do this and a lot we can learn from each other. Even people who are not religious at all can get the benefits of faith and spirituality by reading the ancient masters, by understanding the Stoic philosophers, by walking in nature, by analyzing the works of Johann Sebastian Bach, something that actually brings you to elevation above yourself. Here's the point. You must, it's interesting, that word for that third ashrama, vanaprastha, it comes from these 2 Sanskrit words, van and prastha, which means to retire into the forest. Now, that doesn't mean literally to retire into the forest. I don't want to do that. I have no interest in retiring into a forest. But the metaphor is to step back systematically at different points of your life and at different points of your day, back from the chaos that comes from your business life and even your family life, and to see the bigger picture, to elevate yourself away from the realities of day-to-day life. The problem is that we have a tendency to focus too much on the details of our day-to-day lives. My money, my house, my car, my job, my commute. It's just so tedious and boring. We need perspective and we need peace. And the only way we can do that is with elevation. And the only way we can get elevation is with faith and philosophy and spirituality. And that's why it's so critically important that all of us have a practice where we ask, what are my values? Number 2 is we consciously seek a meditative practice, traditional or non-traditional. And number 3, that we expose ourselves to the ancient wisdom of people who have a lot more perspective than we do. If we do these 3 things, we're well on our way to having a practice that can sustain us for the rest of our lives.
But your book, when I first read it, the latest book, that is From Strength to Strength, I think one of the reasons it appealed to me so much is because I'm right in the middle of your target audience, if you were to look at my age group, right? Mm-hmm. I've been thinking about it, and I've been thinking about it from 2 perspectives. One is, of course, a marketing perspective. So if I were to work for your publisher, the question I would be asking is there any way in which I can make this book more appealing to younger people who are still in the first curve? Right. And who can probably benefit from some of the perspectives that are there in the book. So the question I have for you is simply this. Is it possible to do all this? And I wanted to end by asking you the keys to happiness, which you've already spelt out, so I'm going to ask you to repeat that at the end.
Right.
But is it possible to do all this while someone is still in the first curve, or is everyone going to be so caught up chasing the things that they chase typically in that stage of their career that they're not going to be bothered with this?
Well, I wrote the book about the second half of life. I wrote it for people who are my age, but I also wrote it for people who are a version of me 30 years ago. Why? Because I wish I knew these things when I was younger. This is a book for old people and people who hope to be old at some point and hope to be happy when they are old. The earlier we start making investments in ourselves, the better off we're going to be. This is like a pension plan. You can start saving your money when you're 60. That's better than not saving your money. But if you start when you're 60, you're not going to have very much when you're 75. If you start when you're 30, you're a lot better off. If you understand the long cadence of your life, you're a lot better off. If you're thinking about what you want your life to look like later, even earlier, you're going to make smarter decisions. You're going to have more appreciation for your teachers. You're going to learn a lot more. You're going to bank the later intelligence earlier, and your changes are going to be a lot easier. You're going to be a more valuable, more respectful, more loving person. This is one of the reasons that I teach this at Harvard. I teach at the Harvard Business School, some of the best business students in the world. Not on their second curve, but they need to understand it. They need to understand their parents. They need to understand their bosses, and they need to understand their future selves. I'm giving them a vision of what life is going to be like and the best things that they can do now so that they're more effective now and more effective later. Now, when I talk to them about things like being more generous and serving other people, that's not just about later in life. That's better now too. Other lessons that are in the book, for example, there's a lesson that's very important that all happy, successful older people, one of the things that they all have in common is that they've stopped adding to their lives and they're now subtracting from their lives. It's a very important concept of going from adding things to taking things away. Now, that doesn't mean just becoming poorer and living in a cave and owning no possessions. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about getting rid of encumbrances that distract you from yourself, getting rid of unproductive relationships and attachments and things that don't help you and things you don't really want. And, all of these desires and cravings, this is an easier concept to explain in India than it is in the United States, because we tend to be so acquisitive in the United States. Yet it's absolutely true. When I tell my students this, it starts to make sense, because it turns out that the sooner you do that, the better off you are. Every single person should be thinking about what they can get rid of this year. You're on your birthday, you have a bucket list of the things that you want to do this year, but you should also have a reverse bucket list of things you want to stop doing this year, things you want to get rid of this year. And that's true if you're 68, but also if you're 28 years old. So all of these ideas work for everybody.
Okay, my penultimate question. Media, especially social media, has made all our lives so much more public, right? I mean, I sometimes get the sense that we are all living in a bowl. And that seems like another factor that adds to the difficulty of transitioning from one curve to another, right? Because I think especially successful people are so much under scrutiny all the time, that maybe this perception that exists of them, this image that exists of them, makes it more difficult to transition.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely true that when you're being observed, it's harder to change. And there's a perfect example of that. You find that politicians who are constantly in the public eye, they can't change their opinions because they're called hypocritical if they change their opinions. Now, it's normal to change your opinions. It's healthy. Everybody should change their opinions when circumstances change or your information gets better. Those are the two situations. And you would never go to a businessman and say, your investment portfolio should never change. You'll go out of business. You'll be bankrupt. You should make changes based on your understanding or changing circumstances. The same thing is true politically for any of us. But if we stake our claim politically on social media in public that this is what we believe, and people hold us to that and call us hypocritical if we change, it makes us rigid. It makes us less effective. And that's a really important thing to keep in mind. One of the things that I recommend to most people is that they spend less time being public on social media. That they, I understand it would exist. I mean, in your business, wow, I really get it. And I'm on social media too. I have hundreds of thousands of people who follow this. There are people who are talking about this conversation right now on social media. And I'm glad of that because it gives them an opportunity to participate and to express themselves. But we have to be very careful to not have it make us rigid, to have it make you and me, people who are incapable of changing our opinions, it makes people less humble. And therefore, it makes people less happy. And that's a really big problem for people who are in the public eye.
Okay, the last question. You did mention the keys to happiness as part of an answer, and I have a feeling that some people in the audience might have missed it because it was part of a lot of other things that you said. So for the benefit of our viewers, could you just spell out the 4 concepts that you laid out again?
Sure, absolutely. Those are the 4 habits of the happiest people. Let me start briefly by saying, what is happiness? Now, because that's an important question too, and it's related. Now, most people think that happiness is a feeling, but it's not. If you believe that happiness is a feeling, then you will never be able to manage your happiness. Feelings are evidence of happiness. They're not happiness themselves. Happiness is a combination of 3 things: enjoyment of your life, satisfaction with your accomplishments and goals, and a sense of meaning and purpose. Meaning and purpose is the most important of all. Why? Because it requires suffering. It requires challenges. It requires unhappiness, as a matter of fact. Looks like we broke there for a second. Our connection broke up there for a second, but we're back. So the first of the practices to find meaning and purpose are work that serves our sisters and brothers. And don't forget, everybody is your sister and everybody is your brother. 2 is real friends, not deal friends. 3 is true love for your family. These are the people that God put in your life that you didn't choose. And so you must love them despite the fact that you didn't choose them. And that's a very important distinction. And finally, and last but not least, it's your faith and spiritual journey, is walking the spiritual and philosophical path. Work, friends, family, faith. Those are the big 4. We need to put in a deposit in each one of those accounts every single day with no exceptions. And if we do, we're well on the way to leading our own lives to be happy people so that we can lift other people up and bring them together in bonds of happiness and love.
Dr. Brooks, thank you very much. And I look forward to meeting with you on your next visit to India.
I can't wait to join everybody in your beautiful country. I hope you have a prosperous and wonderful evening. Thank you for having me.
A vision becomes a milestone when it helps make our lives richer with love and laughter. When it helps make a cleaner, smarter, and a more beautiful planet. So that you can set off on joyous new journeys and adventures. Building stronger bonds and bridging impossible distances, which take you from the ever new to the forever beautiful. Opening up vistas and windows to a vibrant new world. A vision becomes a milestone when it touches millions of lives. Aditya Birla Group. Big in your life.
Wealthy in minerals, rapid industrialization, swift pace of development, creating its unique identity in the nation's development roadmap, is the success story of Chhattisgarh. Chhattisgarh is presently ranked 4th in the Ease of Doing Business Index in India. A lot of credit for this goes to the Chhattisgarh's visionary leadership to create a bright future for its citizens. With the potential to generate 24,000 megawatts, Chhattisgarh is all set to be the power pivot of the country. Chhattisgarh has been topping the charts as the cleanest state. Due to the all-round rural development and agriculture welfare schemes, Chhattisgarh is a model state for rural prosperity and urban excellence. With the intent of the state leadership and results being seen on ground, Chhattisgarh is on the path of rapid and model growth and development.
There are those who are always looking for what's next. Changing lanes, shifting modes, always in command. Sensing what lies ahead. That first scent of yet another success. The all-new Hyundai Tucson next drives now.
माननीय प्रधानमंत्री श्री नरेंद्र मोदी के विजन और प्रदेश के युवा मुख्यमंत्री पुष्कर सिंह धामी के मिशन से प्रगति के पथ पर निरंतर आगे बढ़ रहा है उत्तराखंड। रोजगार, शिक्षा, स्वास्थ्य, निवेश और भ्रष्टाचार मुक्त उत्तराखंड के सपने को साकार कर रही है उत्तराखंड सरकार। पर्यटन से राज्य में मिल रहे हैं आर्थिक प्रगति को पंख। उत्तराखंड के सीएम तक पहुंच रही जनता की आवाज। उत्तराखंड में बढ़ता निवेश बन रहा है विकास का मुख्य आधार। राज्य की जनता की सुनी मन की बात मिलने जा रहा है राज्य को मजबूत भू कानून का आधार। उत्तराखंड के वीर सैनिकों का हो रहा है सम्मान। प्रदेश में भ्रष्टाचार पर की बड़ी चोट। सुखी, समृद्ध, खुशहाली की तरफ लगातार है बढ़ना। जन जन का है सपना, आगे बढ़ता रहे उत्तराखंड अपना।
A land of awakening. A land of joy. A land where every step forward is a journey within. I have started my journey. When will you start yours?
With over 8,000 passionate employees working hard in difficult terrain, pushing boundaries, transforming India's energy landscape. We stand ready with innovative prowess to write another history, fueling the nation and contributing to India's energy security. We are Oil India Limited.
From the interior parts of hilly areas to metro cities, today there are more than 8,800 Jan Aushadhi Kendras have been opened to provide affordable and quality medicines. These centers have 1,616 types of medicines by providing affordable medicines to about 10 lakh patients every day. Jan Aushadhi has been able to save up to 18,000 crore rupees for needy people in the last 8 years. Quality is also at the forefront of medicines at low prices.
2025 तक हम छलांग लगा चुके होंगे $1 ट्रिलियन डिजिटल इकोनॉमी की ओर।
आज जब हम आजादी का अमृत महोत्सव मना रहे हैं, तो मेरा भी यही सपना है कि भारत में हर हाथ में स्मार्टफोन हो, हर खेत में ड्रोन हो और हर घर में समृद्धि हो।
डिजिटल इंडिया, catalyzing new India's decade. जय हिंद।
जय जय गंगे, जय जय गंगे, नमामि गंगे, नहीं रुकेंगे, हम स्वच्छ करेंगे। तू युग युग से बहती आई, तूने ही हमको पाला है। तेरी उंगली पकड़ चलना सीखा, जीवन तूने ही संभाला है। तेरा कर्ज चुकाना है हमको, कर्तव्य निभाना है हमको। नमामि गंगे, हम स्वच्छ करेंगे, हम स्वच्छ करेंगे।
Power Grid, a Maharatna PSU of Government of India, largest transmission utility of country,
embarked on one such remarkable journey to establish one nation, one grid, one frequency, high voltage integrated transmission network, an electric superhighway through which power flows across the length and breadth of the country. Meeting challenges has always been a way of life at Power Grid. Transmitting power, transforming lives.
REC unleashes the potential of energy. REC funds energy. Funding that catalyzes. Funding that inspires. Funding that transforms. For sustainability and reliability. For investment and development. Adding value every day in every way. This is what our energy is. This is REC.